So they do very, very well. And they build their own temples. And as I say in the article, and we've talked about it before, the Jeffrey Epstein sort of shrine that he built there on that island is a very, very good likeness of what I'm talking about, with Muslim design, because they're technically in Muslim countries, and they're well in with those Muslims. And anyone who knows about the history of Islam knows that the entire Islamic empire, everywhere you find it, was run by Jews administratively. And these Gaionim also did that. So they were highly respected. But they were respected for other reasons as well, because everybody knew their lineage. Sorcerers and apothecaries and all the rest of it. Astronomers, special people that had all of this occult power. And then, long after Rome has fallen, and the status quo is very, very different, the time comes, this will be about sort of moving into, say, the 10th and 11th centuries. This group of what's known as the Gaionim, or the Gaonate, or that's how they at least present themselves officially as Jews. But I always look at them as crypto-atonists or whatever. They start moving back. Their descendants start moving back westward, making their way back to where they came from. And along the way, it's the movement of this group that's very, very important, because as they move westward, at some point they change their name to Freemason, Sons of the Sun, Princes of Light, Freemason. And then, without going into a long story of it, they have several meetings of importance. Out in the east, they'd already married in with the House of Edessa and other occult societies. I've already mentioned that. And in our program, Eastern Illuminati, we should link that up. You'll hear about the Orontids and the Commagene and these other families out there for people who don't know anything about it, the Herods. Right? So they're already in illustrious familial connections, right? Then the big event, of course, was they move west. They encounter the Knights Templar leaders as they're on their first crusade. And then they link up. And it's now, because it's also been recognized that the Knights Templar were in league with the Nazarenes, fourth sect. See, on surface they're Catholic, but the Catholic Church is going to suppress these guys very, very soon, because they find out what's going on. That in the East, the Templars who went east as Catholics stopped being Catholic. In other words, stopped being fifth sect when they met the descendants of the Nazarenes and possibly the Essenes or whoever else they bumped into. But the guess of most writers is it's the Nazarene sect, the sect of James. And they're converted to the real Christianity. And so this then immediately links them to the Gaionim and to the House of Edessa, because the House of Edessa is also, right, during the time of the Roman Empire. You have to read Ralph Ellis on this, but in brief, when they arrived in Syria and Palestine, they married in with the Nazarene sect. And as I said, it wasn't a bunch of impoverished. Why would one of the most illustrious families start marrying in with just rank and file Jews? Didn't happen. It was very high level Jews. So here we see a pattern emerging. And so the 9 strange hermits, monks, or pilgrims or whatever, that all the bloodline writers of the Merovingian story know, that accompanied Hugh de Champagne and Hugh de Payens over to France, to Burgundy, never been identified. Their leader was a strange character. Who the hell are they? Nobody can answer. Were they Essenes? Because later on, the Templars under Godfrey de Bouillon form a group called the Cistercian monks, a monastic order. Why? Bernard de Clairvaux, right? Are these Gaionim in the West? Because they're still around. Cistercian order still exists. the point I've made is that these Sadducees or sons of Zadok are already Atonist anyway. They're probably outrank the fucking Templars, for all we know. If you have to get into that whole thing about ranking, it's not a very good idea, because the Merovingians are already deeply involved with Judaism through a group called the Benjaminites. Again, Article 2. And the Benjaminites are the twin tribe of Judah, who were expelled because of their own crimes in Judah, were expelled into the West. They, at a previous age, move into the West with their leader Dan, and bump into the Franks, who are the Proto-Merovingians. Franks doesn't mean France, it means German tribe, but because there were so many of them in France, France got its name from this tribe of the Franks, and they're very interesting. They were pagans originally, and goddess worshippers, right? So the Danites, in the form of these Benjaminites, marry in with the Proto-Merovingians, and there you have that. And that's why, their king, William de Gallon, the great Proto-Templar, the great Merovingian, was called a hook-nose, because, and there's so many other Jewish anecdotes, and that's why wherever the later Templars went, the Jews were tasseled to purse. Wherever there was a big bastion of Templars, right, that's Merovingians, so right near where there was Speyer in France and other places, or in Spain, wherever Templars went, Portugal, there was always a very large Jewish community nearby. And later on, when we talk about the clerics, this connection is absolutely vital to understand to where we're going with this. So the Sadducees then are the Freemasons, which is one account of why there is this Jewish, if you have to keep on using that word, right, symbolism in it, including the capital G, because that's Gaionim. It's just as simple as that. And in the article I explain other meanings of the symbol, like the lowercase g would be a serpent symbol. Well, if you can, there's another thread. That's why I say it's very, very complicated, because then this brings in the steering committee of the Knights Templar called the Priory of Sion. That's the serpent sisterhood number, right? These Queen Helenas back then, and these, Queen Urania and Thea Muse Urania, her daughter, who's the real Mary Magdalene. You see, they're all part of that group. What a story that is. And it's also been told in code and allegory. The three Grail Maidens and the whole thing. So these monks, I believe, the Proto-Cistercians, were wined and dined by the Knights Templar, honored and respected, and given homes in the West. And so that is why Templarism and Masonry are just intertwined. And anyone who ever tries to contest that, and guess what? There's people all over the internet. Books have been written to transfer. There's no connection between the two, even though with your own eyes you can see that there is. And you just say the apron, the wool apron, is a simulacra for the woolen undergarments of the castrati, the Knights Templar. You bet it's Templar. And on it goes. So, the whole allegorical story of the Gaionim is told, you see, in this tale of the coffin. That's just one Masonic symbol that shows you that resurrection of the Sadducees was going to happen. So the sons of Zadok, the sons of Melchizedek, the order of Melchizedek is alive and well. And it's working alongside the Knights Templar. That's key to the understanding the origins of Masonry, right? And in Masonic lore and tradition, they enact all of this. What the hell? You'll find anecdotes in bloody movies, right? Like Indiana Jones type stuff, right? Of all of this that we're talking about. But most people don't even notice it, right? So this Gaionim, then, as they moved into the West, they also stopped. One of the third things that was important, right? We said about the meeting of Edessa, the connection with the Nazarenes, and the Templar connection. But wherever the Templars go, you're also dealing with Italian merchants and Silesian pirates and all. There's a lot of handshaking. In fact, the Masonic handshake is also Mithraic. The wearing of the gloves and the grips and all of this, and the salutes. So this is a vast story. of cabals getting together. One more ugly than the rest. There's no good and bad and ugly, it's just ugly. So, but a very large contingent of them stopped in what we know today to be modern day Turkey, in Thessalonica and Salonika. And this is a very great interest of mine. We've talked about it way back in Unslaved. And there's so much more to say about it, and in the Thule Society Premium, I bring some of this up. This group of Gaionim, when they get to Turkey, they become these sort of, crypto Jews that are running the Turkish Empire for the lazy fat ass sultans who just sat around in their harems eating dates all day long. But one of the footprints there is that they invited hundreds of thousands of sort of persecuted Jews from southern Spain, because those Jews had served the Moors, right? Another connection to Islam. Islam in Spain. Spain was conquered by the Moors, who were an Islamic group, but they sat back on their fat asses, and it was the Jews who ran their Moorish empire. So the natural Spanish people hated the Jews for working for the oppressor. So when the Moors were overthrown by Christian kings, the Jews now were like up against the wall. We're going to get you bastards because you served our oppressors. Well, guess what? All of a sudden, the Gaionim descendants in Turkey said, we'll make a home for you here. And so, I don't know what the number is, like almost 1 million persecuted Jews, Spanish Jews, fled Spain and moved up to live in Salonika area and in Turkey. That's nice of you guys. Thanks a lot. But of course, this act of philanthropy had a hidden agenda. The Gaionim wanted to disguise themselves, and you do it by getting a bunch of ordinary religious Jews, like the peanuts, the packing. So you're less conspicuous. In fact, you're invisible. And you can get up to all of your occult practices, And so now you start getting lodges like Grand Orient and the Martinists, even these quasi-Rosicrucian orders, on the Protestant side. The thing can start from there. The Turkish connection, and I show in the Thule Society some intriguing anecdotes there, because the Thule Society is formed by Rudolf von Sambotendorf, who came out of Turkey. And Turkey and Germany have always had the deepest connections. If there's anyone living in Germany who knows. Right? So, they've been allies and all that, right? But Alexander Parvus, who almost single-handedly created communism, came from there. Basil Zakharov, the biggest gun runner ever known in history. Again, people must go to the Thule Society, Link, check that out. This creature, he turns up in the James Bond movies as Blofeld, that character. It's actually based on a real-life character. He was Turkish, and on it goes. And then, as I say, the 5 leaders, the Young Turks, who are all pro-communist. To call them liberals doesn't cut it. Go back to our Diana Springola interview. 3 of them ran after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. 3 of them fled into Bolshevik Russia for safety. So there's no doubt about it that these were crypto Jews. And their descendants still run businesses in the West to this day. And although they were allied with First World War Germany, we know how that worked out. That plan didn't really come off. Germany itself was crushed, and the Ottoman Empire fell. And there's so much to be said about that. We just want to focus in on the secret society intrigue that's also Turkish, and that is why the Shriners wear the Turkish cap. For one, and that red is blood. The Turkish red cap with a little tassel is all based on what we're talking about. And it's the Turks Islam saying, we will soak the word in blood. We're in blood up to our heads of the Christians. Just letting you know, right? And the great big scimitar and all of that. What the hell is this weird Turkish symbolism, Muslim symbolism doing in Masonry? Well, as I said, the whole thing, you've got to trace it all back. You've got to know what you're talking about. And why on the symbol of the Shriners do you have the face of Akhenaten, of all people? You got to trace it back, like we're doing right now. And you have to have the patience to do it step by step. They know you don't have it, the patience. That's why they're laughing. There's nothing to worry about there. The symbolic keys of decipherment are not in people's hands. And all of these groups we've been talking about look like, they've been all different. And where are the connections between them all? And you need certain mavericks like Ralph Ellis and all, to give you key pieces. But Sigmund Freud plays a part here. There's others. I make it all available in my work where it all comes from, so that people can make up their own minds. So the Turkish connection is absolutely important. The spoils of the Turkish Empire, say somebody like Benjamin Disraeli or, organize it to get hold of it. But that wealth never goes away, because the Order of Melchizedek, what they say goes, right? If they were behind the rise of the Turkish Empire and they were into the drugs, and they were into the gun running and the opium dealing, and there's even indications that they were massively involved in white slavery. This is even whistleblown in certain shows. The Turkish connection, because these sultans wanted white flesh. And their agents, no problem, whatever you want. But the city of Lyon in France, this really goes, places like Luxembourg, Brussels, you'd be amazed at where these people ended up, having headquarters. London, of course, well, Templar, London is Templar, and it's just so obvious when you get to that part of it. And then the only thing that remains really to say is that the fourth sect that plays a key role here, you see, why are they really different from the fifth sect is that they were, the Nazarene sect were left-wing, what we would call socialists. So this is where it crosses over then into a political statement and stance. And Masonry is the same. If Masonry was formed by these people, and this is not hard to understand, because we see today that socialism is funded and promulgated by the richest in the land, your George Soroses and above. Why couldn't it be the same during the Roman Empire? Why could top level, rich as blazes, Pharisees and Sadducees not have been communal and socialistic, or what passed for that in those days? Well, we know now that that is not a big stretch. We've understood what champagne socialism is, and it's essential to understand this. So this group, we didn't really say that it's also connected to the black nobility, which is a term you just use for the royal families of Europe, be they Protestant or Catholic, coming out of Venice, Venice, Italy. There's other connections you see to Holland. The Merovingians go over to Holland. And then, of course, that group moves over to Britain, and you have that whole story. There's a royal tie-in here, and the Jews were tasseled to purse with them as well. Bankrolling people like William III of Orange, who came over and fought James II, the Catholic king. But if you think it was just a Catholic-Protestant fight, you're sorely like everyone in Northern Ireland thinks that. Yeah, but James Stewart, the Catholic, his daughter is the wife of William III. Mary Stuart is married to the Protestant overlord that wipes out her father and takes over the running of the UK and opens the Bank of England, and therefore enslaves everyone to the debt of that war. The Amsterdam bankers gave him so much. There's actually, I don't know if it's in Diana Sprangola's book or somebody else, actually state the price. I think Nicholas Hagar has the whole of the details in there. And so they just turned around and went, oh, you can pay us back. Oh, well, not you, but the indentured slaves of Britain that you now rule over, they can pay us back in perpetuity. And I think some scholars actually think that to this day, the debt with the interest hasn't been paid off, or at least was paid off only recently. This is in 1690. The Brits had barely paid off the debt while they're waving their flags up at Buckingham bloody Palace. chains of iron, chains of gold. The British Bank, right, of England, and the debt slavery began. Oh, we should have mentioned that in the opening about the different Jewish bankers. Everyone knows about them, right? But they've got the wrong end of the stick as well. They don't understand the Atlantis connection and the connections we're looking at right now. But far more important than that is this socialistic bent. So when the Knights Templar were suppressed, though, and this is what we want to finish on and get to. Okay, the leaders go here, they go there, they go to Lyon, they go to Switzerland primarily, and that's where the Templar money is. Those great banks in places like Belgium, London, primarily Switzerland, not to mention offshore. These were people who knew the Mediterranean Ocean, the Mediterranean Sea. They were mariners, so a lot of it is offshore. But the symbol of the Swiss flag is a Templar symbol, for goodness sake. Yeah, and it's the reverse colors because of what we're going to talk about now. And this is really the key that brings it all together. Because in the 1314, 1307, when Jacques de Molay is burned at the stake and the Templars are suppressed all over the world because the Pope sent out the edict that all the kings and lords of the world should arrest the Templars and have them executed and seize all their lands and everything. Several countries didn't bother doing anything like that, particularly Scotland. But there was other locations as well, because those kings had been put in power by the Templars and stayed fucking loyal to them, right? And also they had a blade to their throats. And that blade came in, the Templar Empire was able to continue existing because of the group that I talk about, and I'm only the exclusive one who does, of a group that I call the clerics. You can call them clerks, lieutenants, deputies, seneschals, marshals, whatever you want to call. And these were this army of worker ants who served the few Templars that actually we're talking about. And those Templars were fucking illiterate. They couldn't even write their own names and they couldn't read Latin or Greek. So all the correspondence between the Templars and their, confederates throughout the whole of Europe and further abroad, all the calculations, the banking, the looking after the stables, the horses, and all of the different assets were run by this anonymous group of deputies. And when the Templars themselves were suppressed, absolutely nothing changed. The Knights Hospitallers, there's a story about how they tried to rip the Templars off at this time, but quickly realized their mistake, and they were eventually, put in their place, and they became aligned with the clerics. And then they changed their name to the Order of Malta. The Knights of Malta tried to steal money from the Templars, or the Templars had given them some money, and they tried to keep it. But the clerks soon took care of that with a bunch of assassinations, whatever, and moved right on in. And so the Knights of Malta became clerks. But not just them. What we know is the Illuminati. He's in a super Jew, financed them, Moses Mendelssohn, who was not only a super Jew and loaded, so rich that he could fund the Illuminati, he was a Jacobin. The Jacobin or the left-wing coterie, you see, that started the French Revolution. A Jacobin. Super wealthy Jews. Well, not super wealthy Jews are the Rothschilds, the Oppenheimers, the Warburgs, the Bauers, all of those guys. Why would they be supporting left-wing causes when the average religious Jew is usually very conservative, highly a believer in individualism, and a dyed-in-the-flesh capitalist? That's who they are. See, so again, things are conflated that we think we put at the door of the Jew, who may be sort of liberal, but so are many Gentiles liberal. No. Who's this ultra-leftist Jew? Are they to be, we've had guests like Charles Moskowitz on, who completely show you that this is not the case. He wrote a book called Left-Wing Anti-Semitism. Because what you don't know and are never meant to know are the steering committee Jews, the conspiratorial Jews, who actually despise Jews. See, the Gentile hasn't been told about that. These anti-Semitic authors also disingenuously never mention it because that would blow their whole gaff. But back to the point, the clerics then take over the empire, but that's not the end of their story. They become the press, they become chemists, they become lawyers. Oh, and publishers. They become other things too, like cartographers and genealogists and what have you. But those would have been the main professions. And then they start secretly opening other secret societies because the Templars are giving them orders to do exactly that. We were a secret society. We controlled the world. We did banking. We're suppressed. But guess what? You open a bunch of satellite groups run by our people, and some of the even the Templar symbolism shows up on those quasi-Masonic lodges. So Scottish Rite, Strict Observance, Grand Orient, the Martinists, Lodge Theodore. I mean, it goes, I mention all of this in my work, right? All bankrolled from places like Switzerland. But that's not the end of the story. Because the fifth sect were persecuting them and still looking for them, there was danger abroad. And some of the kings of Europe were willing to do as the papal edict said and arrest the Templars. And they were the kings that owed the Templars money. So of course you want them suppressed because then you don't have to pay it all back. And by the way, you can even go and seize some lands. And this did happen, right? So the clerics decided to do something extraordinary. And this then is so key to what we're, my whole thesis. And as far as I know, it's never been ever pointed out by any other author. And that is that they converted in mass to Judaism. So they'd been working, like I said, in Portugal, which is a huge Templar bastion, by the way, in Spain and France, and I've just included Turkey, and of course we have Britain. Anywhere that they operated, the Jew was working alongside them, tassel the purse. And I've tried to sketch in the reasons why, the early connections between these groups during the First Crusade and what have you, right? They're fourth sect. And so they're married in with Jewish families, some of them very powerful. So lower Jews say, yeah, I got no problem working for you guys. We know you're not really Catholic. You're fourth sect. That's stay quiet about that, right? And in the lodges, that's why you open a lot of lodges, because then this is where the secrets are disclosed. And in the Jewish lodges, the Jews are disclosed to this. Those guys are not what you think. So, and this sounds outlandish that so many Knights Templar lieutenants, they're basically quasi-Templars, would convert to Judaism? Yes, but in the 1600s, as all Jewish scholars know, Zabbatai Zevi, or Zevi, the great Sabbatean, creator of the Sabbateans, when his ass was caught, he converted from Judaism to Islam. The Sultan was going to have him executed, so his only way out was to convert to Islam. 100 years later, Jacob Frank of the Frankists, just continue the Sabbatean tradition, he was caught and was going to be executed, but he converted to Catholicism. There's your precedents, except they're not precedents that come after, but the point is made that this kind of thing happened. You were given leniency. But what's not told to you so much is that the army of followers of Zabbatai Zevi and the army of followers all over the world of bat crazy motherfuckers who followed these two jerks thinking they're the Messiah come back, and they're twist like the same kind of creatures you get today. I am the 666. No, but I'm Jesus too. No, I'm your Messiah, but I'm the devil incarnate. All this twisted stuff. People believed it and followed these guys. Doesn't take much to drive people into hysteria, right? But these are not just rank and file Jews that followed Zevi and followed Frank. These are some of the wealthiest ones out there. And they converted too. The Sabbateans in mass converted to Islam. Crypto Jews are in Islam. Scroll forward. Got Muslim Brotherhood. Got Islamo-communists running wild, causing havoc, pulling down the Shah of Iran and causing any connection to... No, it's all the Ayatollah. It's all the Sunnis. It's all the... You don't know that Islam has been infiltrated? It's in the books. You don't know that Catholicism, i.e. Christianity, has been infiltrated by the Frankists? But I'm more interested in a previous conversion in the 15th century of a group that worked closely administratively alongside Jews and had a lot of, things simpatico. And then, in the great need to hide from the forces of the fifth sect, the clerics converted en masse to Judaism. So now do you see why when you're going around accusing Jews, you're actually really accusing crypto Templars? This is very important. And they're left wing. Right. Now do you know why it appears to be the Jews were top heavy in communism or Bolshevism, and likewise in other places in the world, anarchists? And you're out there burning Jews for this? Liberal Jews, conservative Jews, wealthy Jews. History is just studded with nothing but pogroms and anti-Semitic writers who don't know the fuck what they're talking about and always get it wrong or partially get it right. You got some that are better than others. Douglas Reed, Yuri Lina, right? But none of them have got it right, folks. Eustace Mullins, but I've looked at all of their work thoroughly, inside out, upside down, and know where the flaws are too. And this was a perfect cover. And then when you're a crypto Jew, right? Well, when you're a crypto Templar, hiding under the veil of Judaism, you now have the ability to infiltrate legitimate Jewish businesses, because the person with whom you're entering into partnership or whose daughter you've married has no fucking idea about occult Judaism. They don't know anything about this conversion any more than a Christian knows about it. So to give an example, I'm a Jewish businessman who's done very well, say, in the silk trade or in gunpowder or in one of the big things was diamonds and, precious stones. I meet this other Jew who says, hey, I want to come into business with you. And they do. They sign up, right? And they're doing business. And the one guy, he says, hey, this is a great business you got. Wouldn't you like to open some more? Make it into a franchise. He goes, yeah, but where's the money? He goes, don't worry. I've got some rich relatives. I'll get some money. They love me. They live across town. They're rich. So Jew number 2, the crypto Templar, of course he's got a pipeline to the fucking biggest cache of wealth that anybody could ever lay fucking eyes on. But he pretends that, it's some rich family members. They might invest in us. And he brings back 1 million fucking Deutschmarks. And suddenly, the Jew number 1 who invented the idea, invented the machine, or invented the system, his business explodes. But after the documents have been signed, it's the money man who really owns everything. And the Jew number 1 is maybe only kept on, if he's not completely swindled of his money, he's kept on only as the figurehead. Get it? Because there's a camouflage happening here. And Jewish businesses throve. Well, of course they will, because the Jews work closely together. But factoring what I'm talking about, you can enter into a Jewish relationship with somebody who's banking, money lending, whatever, and you can immediately see success because you have a cache of wealth that they don't have. And so you take over their businesses. You get them to sign it away and say, this is for your protection. If anything was to happen, I get the blame, which really means, no, mate, you're out. I own your business. And well, he's family. He's one of us. And so the Jews have been taken more than anybody else by this ruse. And then only to find themselves, innocently, but they're the brunt of the anti-Semites, thick heads, the neo-Nazi crowd, right? Later on as well. We've lost everything. We've lost everything, and yet, we end up in the brunt. But these crypto Templars are the ones who really own everything. So they're converting to Judaism, you see, turned out in the end to be very, very lucrative. And that's why you find them, their descendants in the highest positions of politics, and why they've even orchestrated things like the Bolshevik Revolution. So I just hope that this, helps to explain the rise of socialism. And then through not only did they open secret societies, these crypto Templars, but they opened the guilds. They opened delivery companies. They opened many chivalric and equestrian orders. These Montefiores and Montefiores and all sorts of, Jewish families coming out of Amsterdam and Lyon. But you've got to understand that these are only like the Rothschilds. They're not Jews. They're not Jews in the sense of any religious connection or any racial connection, at all. And through the guilds, they're able to meet and able to recruit new people and get their sons and daughters into where they need them to be. And then also through the lodges, and they can close lodges and fold up these guilds, and but these are often fraternities by which they can ply their trade, and they've done that for centuries. And anytime there's a problem, like there was a problem with the Knights Hospitallers, they're equipped to deal with it, because the real Templars, their masters, haven't gone away, and they immediately give them orders going, you go get our money. And if that king or that duke owes you money, we'll get it. And if we don't get it from him directly, we'll abduct and murder their children or their wives or something. We'll get the money, or we'll burn their properties or whatever. You're dealing with something pretty sinister here, and they're the ones who are still in power. And I make the case on the Female Illuminati site for those who are interested. So, but it's important that you realize the connections to the Eastern groups, the Eastern Illuminati, which includes the Turkish sort of empire. And even what we've just talked about now, is just part of it. But I hope we've covered some of the really most important parts here. But when ordinary, well-meaning, hardworking Jews opened these extraordinarily successful businesses, little did they know, what was going to happen, any more than when you joined Cecil Rhodes's round table and you thought that they were pro-British conservatives, how wrong you were, what the agenda really was. And then one last thing is that when these crypto Templars converted to, say, Islam, like I've mentioned, or Christianity or Judaism, you've got to realize it was simplicity itself, because look, after all, they weren't literate. And the average Jew might have been smarter than the average Muslim and Christian back then. But look, at the end of the day, they weren't that intelligent. These guys I'm talking about really were the intelligent ones, right? So infiltrating these groups was child's play. As intelligent as some Jews are and everything, yeah, but that didn't stop nothing. So these guys were able to become very wealthy very quick. And then when you're lending money to people, it's a royal road to success, isn't it? Because especially these princes, the black nobility, are land rich, but money poor, cash poor. And so, every which way you turn, you've got a way to bankroll your own empire, the Templar Empire. It's really, really a fascinating story,
It answers so many questions when you break that down like that. And it's questions that I found naturally researching into it and even following up on sources you've mentioned over the years and just trying to get into it. And you know, you read books like The Curse of Canaan, Eustace Mullins, and other
Right.
books. Great information, great books, but like you said, interpreting it through often a very literal interpretation of the Bible or things like that, that, you know, kind of you understand it, you know, I think it's well-meaning, but still missing that piece, right? And then not to discount the great amount of work that many people have done to try to crack this, but the way I started to think about it after some of the shows we've done, because I've seen this in our community too, it's loaded in my comment threads as well, like it's all about this and that, and you have a lot of people that are in this movement that truly believe they've got it cracked with who really runs it, and their target is the Jews. And you go, well, that's just so amateur to me, because we're talking about a group of people here that have their own private cult, their own private religions, that the common man of any era didn't really have any part in, because it was reserved for the elite houses only. And they infiltrated and actually created a lot of the modern forms of what we call our various religions. I started to see the same thing happening in the medical system, right? Of infiltration by some very insidious groups that turned something that was originally meant for good into something that was used for control, right? So I guess that's how I explain it now to people, is I just say, just think of it like this. Like, we see the whole Vatican thing, and we know not to lay blame on all Catholics, but to look at it as, hey, that thing got infiltrated top to bottom by this very dark group. You've referenced the quotes for many years, Michael, from Duke of Brunswick and many of these other European aristocrats, talking about how they saw this infiltration taking place within the Masonic orders, and they called it out, even to the point where they were ready to disband the whole thing and quarantine it because it was so bad. And then you have, when it comes to Islam, you mentioned what went down with the Muslim Brotherhood, the Shah of Iran. Not every Muslim out there is, you know, to be blamed for what's going on at the highest levels of the Islamic occult world. And then the same with the Jews. It's the same thing. And you go, how does that not make more sense that we have a group wearing the costumes of publicly accepted groups, but don't really buy into any of that shit? They just use it as a vehicle to build their hidden empire. And then, like you said so brilliantly, what a great way to put red herrings in the mix where people are chasing their tails and we never find out who the real big boss hogs are, right?
Well, I'm glad you reminded me of that, because isn't it what would happen if the anti-Semitic writer, not the ones you mentioned, but generally the ones that troll the net and other scandal mongers, these sort of neo-Nazi types, they are funded by the very hand we're talking about. That the so-called anti-Semitic writer is one of their agents to lead you in the wrong direction. See, when you're a wolf in sheep's clothing, that doesn't mean you like sheep. So if I infiltrate an order for various reasons, it doesn't mean that I really have any feelings for that group. And if I have to put those guys on the chopping block, I will. Just in that analogy I gave you about ripping off a genuine businessman and taking his wealth for my purposes, which I believe has happened rampantly. Right? In the same way, on a larger scale, I don't need to care about any of those people or their traditions or their silly Messiah beliefs or anything. I just go along with that. That's what the Rothschilds are. That's why they're keepers of the Vatican treasury. That's why they're Knights of Malta. Work that one out. Or like I said, these Protestants with the Catholic flag, allegedly, they couldn't answer that. So the see, this is what you have to follow. These writers of anti-Semitic writers, for the most part, could be in the pay of these clerics, because they do want to keep, the story that I've told hidden. And that's why nobody comes after my work. Nobody wants to, there's not a podcaster out there, right, who sincerely has picked this up. Yet it explains a lot, and we've not talked about the Tsarions or the Order of Tsarion and all that. There's so many other things to get into, and this blindness. See, because remember, anyone listening to this or anything lengthy like this, and we're in it right now, actually, is appropriate, because now everyone is saying, how can we fight the cabal? Even somebody like Tucker Carlson is being removed from his position. He may go on to do great work. He may just evaporate. But he is certainly not the only one who's fallen foul of the system, for God's sake. The books that they've scrubbed, the great journalists that they've scrubbed, right, from time immemorial, the sort of George Orwell whistleblowing types, who now you can't find their works and all of this, because who do you think runs the publishers? Just study the symbolism on the publishing companies. And why would they pick X, Y, and Z, right, and then forget and not publish the other group, like these Commons Beaumonts and all don't get published, but it's okay for a Graham Hancock or somebody, it's like, I got fucking questions there. Ralph Ellis has been pretty much hinterlanded. His work should be every single earth-shattering brilliance. And then the bigger question, of course, which is pertinent to our times, how do we fight this group? Why don't people rise up? The women are screaming, "Where are the men?" Well, after your fucking treatment of them, there's a simple answer. What do you mean where they are? They're fucking backed way off because you're no longer willing to play a supportive role. You've been going crazy and hysterical since the 1980s. But now it's being reiterated in who's pushing back against Big Brother, in any country. Well, some groups are, but then they get shadow banned off of the net. Some, fairly semi-genuine groups, some better than others, but they can't get the publicity out. And I always say more deeply, what's the fucking point of trying to push back when you don't know their actual histories of what you're dealing with? And you've been the mob has been expertly, go down that road, burn those Jews out, go, go, go. Yeah, that's right. While the boys on the balcony are sipping their fucking brandy and going, yes, well done there, dear boy. And raking it in. Real Jews with a real name, with a real guy on them, the real Sadducees. Do you know how many places they've watched burn and they fiddled while it happened? Sure, they were there at the fall of Judea. They know how to work the rabble. They've learned from the Zealots and the Sicarii. They say, yeah, they're our enemy, but we've learned from them. Next time we want to mobilize a revolution, we'll go back in our minds to Judah when they overthrew us. Let's never forget our enemies and how they work. In fact, let's create our enemies and how they work. Because remember, one thing we left out in all of this is the psychological insight that they have in terms of all their enemies. Right. It's a insight that we don't have. So although I don't talk a lot about, I don't offer anything but psychological, solutions to people listening to me. I think if you applied them, it would be hugely fucking brilliant, in the fight against today's, on the street, it would be valuable. But since I don't have any faith, because America, for one, is a highly anti-psychological country, and that's its greatest weakness. And then if you take our, Feminization of America podcast and Kevin McDonald's thesis, you realize that, see, the real handicap for anyone, and I'm talking here about really zealous, well-meaning people who want to get out there and fight the great fight. I believe America's loaded with people like that. But they can't find the map. They're like there's a stone in the shoe that stops them climbing the mountain. And we don't have people out there who are still alluding to this stone, or how it got in the shoe. If you did, I think it would enormously help the situation. For instance, see, the Big Brother knows that, to cut a long story short, they awaken the guilt complex. I've talked about this for years, right? We did a whole set of shows on Red Ice about this. And so there's guilt and there's shame. Now, these are destabilizing psychological syndromes. And everybody has existential guilt, but that's considered to do with existential philosophy about living an authentic life. Yes, that's been mobilized and used by the controllers, but there's another kind of guilt separate to that that's much more powerful in destabilizing masculine energy, or people who would normally say you didn't have this type of guilt, what I'm going to explain right now, you'd be in the fucking streets pulling down towns wherever no drag queens, no fucking queers, not a sign. You wouldn't even need protests or trucker meetings or anything. No, because it would be torn down in their schools immediately. But why is it not? Who studied that? Just like I said before, that oppression is entirely an attitudinal thing. It's along these lines, right? Now, take Christianity as a very prime example, since America is mostly Christian, was in its inception. The trouble is that the leaders know what you don't know, and that is that metaphysically, religiously, theologically, you believe a total and utter fucking lie. It's called Christianity. It's called belief in God or whatever, right? In that form. In your deepest conscience, you know that the shit that you believe when you sign on for that religion, and this includes Judaism and Islam or any other related thing, but since Christianity is really what's happening in the West, we have to focus on that, right? If I believe in any doctrine, and I've, in my philosophical work, always showed you what the alternative is. If you could sweep that shit away, there's legitimate Hermetic principles that are the true Western tradition, right? But no, people insist on being Protestants and Catholics and all that. But do you realize that when you sign on for something that is so absolutely bankrupt of truth, so utterly false, you know it. So the question of whether there's critics or opponents or rivals or Sam Harris or, I avoid those books by Dawkins, it doesn't matter whether those people exist or not. I'm talking about psychologically. You know in your conscience what you believe about Jesus, the afterlife, Mary and God and all the rest of it. All these Catholic countries, these Irish, these Mexicans, these Spanish. It's bullshit. For instance, why is it that the most Catholic countries, fucking unbelievably Catholic countries like Spain, Portugal, and Northern Ireland, today are the biggest supporters of, say, the gender dysphoria thing, right? Or they're the most politically correct and most tolerant of that. How can ex-Catholic, remember what we've talked about prior to this about compensation? Same in America. Because of the Puritan Pilgrim Fathers, right? After a few hundred years, we have the flip side of that, which is the hedonism and the libertinism. Same in the Catholic countries today. You see them that they're super tolerant of all these weirdos and freaks, right? They won't even prosecute. They're trying to normalize it all because they themselves were under the yoke of Christianity. That's again moving to the social level, consequences of believing in false religion. No, I'm now moving to the absolute microcosm of the self. And this is the royal key that nobody I ever hear talk about. And it's why we're immobilized when it comes, we're turned to stone when it comes to fighting the tyrants. And the tyrants know this, that you have for centuries believed a religious lie. And what that does is it awakens a very strong primal guilt against yourself. And that guilt immobilizes you so that when the outside group make you guilty in their way, like you're guilty, you're racist, look how you are to these people, look how narrow-minded you are when it comes to these transsexuals and the gays and the blacks and the blah, blah. They awaken secondary guilt. And that resonates with the original guilt of your religious knots that you're tied up in. The belief is all in the front, right? But deep down inside, anyone who philosophically believes a lie is in a very, very impure and toxic state. It goes for New Agers, it goes for a lot of people. But let's just keep it because there's a direct line to the Christian forefathers in American context. And why there's men walking around, but nobody's doing anything about the most obscene things that are taking place. The unlimited immigration, the call for rights, all of the obscenities of the social justice groups, right? And the postmodernists, the critical theorists. Why we allow all this to be taught from, our schools and all of it? Why? Why is this a mobilization, even when you've got great call to arms? It's because of Christianity. I don't want this to turn into a fucking rant, but that's what, sometimes you need to state it out loud. Because you believe existentially, or your fathers did, people around you believe, in this fucking nonsense, it awakens, and you can't help it. It's a natural, organic response to falsity. Is the awakening of a deep sort of inner guilt. Therefore, you're guilty. Right. But if I come from the outside and say, you horrible, conservative, narrow-minded ratbag, you don't like those homosexuals getting married and having children, or you don't like the single mothers, accuse. They're making me feel guilty from the outside, the media. right? The newspapers, the leaders, the thought leaders, influencers. They want to saturate the external world with guilt. Even our own daughters and sons are being telling, Dad, you just an old, right? My God, you're so narrow-minded. Guilt, guilt, guilt. Yeah, because the welter of guilt that is generated by all these fucking snowflakes and whatever is designed to stimulate the inner guilt, and then you're paralyzed, you're immobilized. This is the key. That's why you can call to arms. You can run in the streets with, bullhorns and say, it's happening. Follow me. Let's go. Things like this used to work, but they don't work anymore because of the length of time. And this is the thread of feminization running in America, courtesy of your Christianity. This is the damage it's done. Just part of it, by the way, just part of it. But it's left a crack. Because when you ideologically, in the deepest, you go to church, you believe in it, it's really emotional. But it's a fucking lie. And you can't even argue it. I mean, obviously, it's like when the astrotheology work or whatever, and you go and you start talking to these Christians, they're fucking lost. Look at this esoteric thoughts guy, right? He did brilliant work to prove this. All the detractors that he had, all the conversations he has, right? The average Christian cannot converse with you about shit. He doesn't know the history of Judaism. He doesn't know about the Gnostic elements that proliferate in even St. Paul. He doesn't know about this fucking Atonist Constantine. Again, with the solarization. Hey, look up, I saw a vision in the sky. And on the moment they're solarizing you, they've got their private worship. They're total reverse, backstage.
And they've hidden the real original away. Like,
yeah.
I just did a little prezzo on this great book. I finally got a physical copy of it. Alvin Boyd Kuhn, Lost Light Interpretation. Like,
the Lost Light.
I couldn't even get through the preface.
The Bible.
Yeah, we're going through the preface of this book was the presentation, Mike. I couldn't even get into the meat of the book, and already there was enough in the preface, for crying out loud. It's right. I'm like,
and that
he was trying to say it's the original was lost and replaced.
Yeah. And that is like a hors d'oeuvre, an appetizer to his masterworks. That is just the hors d'oeuvre, the Lost Light, to his greater works. He was a disciple of Gerald Massey. He had it fucking nailed. I mean, we're talking way, But again, yeah, Alvin Boyd Kuhn, Gerald Massey, they pertinent to what I'm just talking about, as many others were as well, to show you that what religion really is. The priesthood of the Illies that created these satanic religions knew that you're on your knees, figuratively. But this is what it means to be on your knees, is you're guilt-ridden. If you believed in hermetic truths, which are always connected and aligned to nature, you can't go wrong, because it's like Ayn Rand said, go back to your basic premises. When nature is your basic premise, you can't go wrong. Build your ideologies by all means, but build it out of the natural religion, organically, with nature always as your lodestone, your keystone to go to, your go-to place, right? We've lost that, and we butchered all the different people that were into that. And what that did was it awakened a very natural, see, this guilt is not a bad thing. This is part of your conscience, which is directly connected to the moral universe, right? I have the podcast people should watch, The Moral Universe, where this is all explained. So the guilt that I'm talking about is not a bad thing. It is a corrective. But we just let it fester. And that's what's happened historically. It's festered and festered and festered and festered in every Christian group. And that is why when they dose you constantly with guilt, I mean, you're not going to save your transgender child. Didn't that child tell you that they don't feel like a girl? They want to be a boy, and you're standing in the way. And the doctor, say to the parents or some other fucking nut, tells you you're standing in the way of your child's happiness. They're going mad. They're pulling their hair out, and you dare to stand in the way of their happiness? See, that's guilt. So the mothers immediately fold, and sadly we see the men folding as well. Instead of taking a fucking strict saying, you're fucking nut. I'm the male in the family, and I'll tell you what gender you are. You're born a fucking boy, and that's it, mate. And until the day that you leave the house, you can do what you want, but fuck this shit, or I'll throw your computer in the fucking lake. Showing some balls and saying, right, you're out of that school. Is that what they're teaching? or they don't want you to be gender, and that's good. They're not even talking about Mr. and Mrs. and he and she and mommy and daddy are not even mentioned as names. You're out of that school as of now. You know,
and this is being promoted by the churches now. You've seen these churches now that are out there. They're in Victoria. They're out there flying these flags. The priests themselves are transgendered, right?
Yes.
And then you got this Pope, this Jesuit Pope out there just endorsing all the globalist stuff, all the climate stuff, all the gender shit. And you're like, so even when you're like, oh, I'm defending Christianity. Well, what are you defending now? It's totally not even close to what you thought it was, let alone taking it to somebody like a Alva Boyne Kuhn telling you where it originally came from.
There's a very good book by the great writer Peter Hitchens. He's a Christian. He's the brother of Christopher Hitchens. Right. They were always divided because Christopher was an atheist, of course, as we know, and Peter is a Christian. And he wrote a great book. I recommend everybody. I recommend all his books. Get the fucking lot if you can. And they're becoming much harder to find. But the one, what I'm thinking right now is called The Abolition of Britain. Maybe we could link it up. He did The Broken Compass, which is another classic about Britain falling into hell, right? Anyway, and just search on YouTube for speeches by the man. In Abolition of Britain, he talks about these transgender clergymen. And he runs through their agenda. So it's a really good book to read. It's a good book anyway, but it's excellent on this subject of how the churches were taken over by all these weirdos, right? But that's right. But guilt, guilt. Because they have understood the Freudian concept of the guilt complex. And it works on a deeper level than what I've just said, but this is the one that really is, how would you say, applicable to now. The other one is the existential guilt, which is a totally philosophical matter and doesn't pertain to anything we're talking about right now. The other guilt complex, the one that the controllers of, focused on, is the religious personality type. So even though you may say, well, I'm secular, I don't go to church, I stopped being a Christian, it doesn't matter. You're in the culture of a Christian culture. And that means that on some level, morally or ethically, or somehow that same guilt is being stimulated within, on an unconscious level. But in the very religious person, because it's those guys who claim to be, onward Christian soldiers to fight for truth and God, but they're immobilized, they're not doing it, and they never will. I guarantee you there's not going to be any change or rising up against anyone, because these fucking bastards at the helm know this. And so what I'm talking about, obviously, is that you would have to completely renounce all forms of religion before you could fight this evil tyranny. And of course, we know that that's impossible. So that's why I don't sit with bated breath waiting for anything. You'll have flickers. You'll have greatness. You'll have really good men trying to do good work. I'm not saying that. But it'll be buying the bumper sticker, and all of this more than it will be actually going and taking control of our institutions. And when people see if people are listening to me right now, you can take the deepest breath you've ever taken in your fucking life, because now and you don't have to be plagued morning, noon, and night with a question of why aren't people rising up? You've just heard the reason, and so now you can divest yourself. You can breathe deeply and say, got it, Michael. You've relieved me of so much tension and worry. And I'm polishing my AK-47, and nothing's happening. I'm sitting here, right? No, just take a big fucking deep breath. The doors have been kicked open. The windows have been kicked open. It's religion. You believe a lie. You can't argue it. You're a Christian. You've been a Christian all your life, or you believed in some fakery along those lines. And you don't know the first thing about your religion. You don't know its connection to tree worship, the Celtic world, the Phoenicia. You don't know anything about it. There's nothing you know about what's in the Bible, right? But on a deep level of the conscience, you do believe this lie, and you believe in it for all these sort of inauthentic reasons, fear of death, whatever it may be. But the basic, just to keep it short, you believe in a lie. And you feel guilty on a level of conscience because of it. Now, that guilt is a bad enough individual crisis in your life. It is. It can lead to loss of faith and, all sorts of different things. But what you don't understand is that that's been weaponized by your controller who has you by the balls now, right? The strings to which you know, the glove puppet, is that they are working on the guilt. So they find ways in society to make you guilty of this and that and the other. And it is just a torrent of it, an avalanche of guilt. White man, you got to be less white. You don't know that? Coca-Cola tried it with their, you know, be less white. I mean, what the fuck? Well, who runs Coca-Cola? Who runs the drug trade? Because that's what that is. It's a drug. It's just a Coca-Cola, be less white. I mean, what the fuck? Well, who runs Coca-Cola? Who runs the drug trade? Because that's what that is. It's a drug. It's just a sugar drug, right? You look at the back of the Atlantis book, you'll soon fucking find out what's been going on with that. These are the same old groups I'm talking about who knew how to purvey and make money through alcohol. And, you know, that's all been gone over even in the first book. These are the great merchants. But on a psychological level, oppression, see, there's two keys. The person who believes that they're oppressed is oppressed instantly. And he will seek out then, you know, instances of his alienation and his oppression. Secondly, the guilt complex, which affects religious types who know that their religion that they believe in doesn't have a fucking ounce of logic or credibility. They'd rather fight with these Dawkins over tables, you know, because you're defending the impossible. But that's where they'd rather go, because it's a way, it creates a lot of noise, a lot of static, by which you don't really have to look within and face your guilt.
Well, isn't the same true with the Dawkins type on their cult? Like, isn't it this one group versus another that have the same, it's just a different template of a very similar dynamic happening?
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, I'm not an atheist, so I don't believe that they're right either. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's Tweedledum versus Tweedledee. But why people are interacting like that all the time, why these debates are endless, is because for both sides it creates static. The materialist is a dogmatist, scientism. They have to have static so they don't see the lie of their materialism as the McGilchrists and others hack away at it, right? It's fucking goo, right? Oh, fucking goo. But they want to keep on, you know, thinking that materialism has got some teeth left. It doesn't. It never had anyway. But right in the modern age, they want to create static. And so what do? You pick on a bunch of punch bags and then the other guys who want to create static so they don't have to face their own guilt get into big fist fights with the atheists. It's perfect setup. I've seen it from the start like this.
And the crowd watches it, and they don't know there's alternatives to all that stuff.
Well, this is the big thing that my work tries to bring to the bear, is that there's a there is a Western magical tradition that dates from, you know, the great Hermeticists of Italy. If you just, you know, there's so many starting points at this, but, you know, Pico della Mirandola, Marcello Ficino, and others, they translated in the Corpus Hermeticum, which is not perfect, by the way. There's Gnostic elements crept in there, you know, and that's a long story of how that happened. There's been a cross-pollination, an evil one between Gnosticism and Hermeticism. If you go back to the cyberpunk tarot interviews we've done, and there is, my premiums on Gnosticism will walk you through all of that. New Ageism is Gnosticism. You'd be amazed. That finally, you know, it was a contaminated thread or corrupt thread that ran through what we call Hermeticism. So Hermeticism is not unadulterated, unfortunately. You know, it's got these other bizarre, some Eastern shit thrown in. It's got contaminated, like everything has.
Everything. Yeah.
But the pure version of the high area, and this includes the entire story of astrotheology and astrology, is part of the Tsarion teaching, as many other things were. The Bach Saga preserves other amazing fucking shit. You know, there's many strands to contribute to what Hermeticism really is. It's a vast study. We've been doing brilliant stuff on it here. Probably on Unslaved is the best platform for teasing out, you know, the Hermetic tradition, what that's all about. And then up until the time of Hegel and Schelling, you see, you had another iteration of it that itself got crushed and got boulderized by the Marxists and the postmodernists. They say no sooner do you have the rising of the real thing as the Pepsi Cola version is immediately preferred and dispensed. It's so fucking tragic. You're just about to reach it again, and Western man, shoots himself in the fucking foot. But as long as this Christianity in all of its forms, Protestant, Catholicism, all the myriad divisions. See, one reason why there are so many denominations is that people are uncomfortable with the lie that they believe. So in squirming, they go, let's form Seventh-day Adventist. No, the Baptist. No, the Methodist. No. Don't you see that that's all squirming because it doesn't sit right? You've spoken about this before as well. Why are there so many fucking denominations? I know Alvin Boyd Kuhn does.
Yeah. It says a lot, just that, doesn't it? Just that the fact that there's competing factions within the supposedly reading the same unadulterated holy text. That's
But if you knew that what you believe is false, that would be a catalyst, wouldn't it, to creating another version of it? Because you're not sitting right with the one version. That's why there's so many. It's so obvious. It's no brainer. The many denominations and twisted, crazy versions of this church and that church and all of the other sundry paths that cropped up in America is because the original doesn't quite fit. So what were Jehovah's Witnesses? What did they go off and do? What's on Mormons, the Quakers, right? The fucking Seventh-day Adventists and all of the groups I just mentioned and many, many more. Obviously, the one thing doesn't fit. So it hybridizes almost immediately. But you never get out of the trap because each one still contains the flaw, the crack in the crystal. And until religion is no more, like Shelley asked, right, that the last king is strangled with the guts of the last priest. Yeah, put that over your bed. You'll never fight the tyranny. It's autocratic and it's theocratic. And both of them work on guilt. So your Prince Charles, he's the high priest. He's the king, His mother before him was the head of the black nobility, you see. These are priests. The king is always under the priest.
Well, look at the contradiction of this. I was thinking this is kind of ironically hilarious that all the same woke types that were screaming for decades about white patriarchy are now actually on Twitter right now, Michael, swearing allegiance to the new king, who just so happens to be a white patriarch. I'm like, what are the fucking odds?
Yeah, well, see, that's interesting. He and that fucking monster, Schwab, feed you guilt from morning to night about what you're doing to the planet.
Yeah, the climate religion, yeah.
Yeah, behind that is the guilt. Started with Al Gore, right? But it worked. If you're 18 years old, how the fuck have anything you do got to do with the climate? We've had Ralph Ellis on who walked us through every detail of the farce. Again, so he's shadow banned, right? And intelligent people don't listen to him. So, but this is the guilt trip. So, but you'd say, but that 18-year-old doesn't give any shit about Christianity. No, but it's in their blood. It is still there. They're still in the ethos of it. They know Christians. Many of them go to these mega churches. They haven't weeded it out for themselves, because weeding it out is to read Alvin Boyd Kuhn, is to know how it got installed in the first place, its ins and outs, like Esoteric was doing, to dive in and find out, what is this lie? What does it consist of? Right? And then he finds, the work of people like me and Ralph and others, all these enormous Greek scholars that he had on, to tease it all out and find out. That's a man who knew how to find out what he does not already know. The human race today is not able, even with the internet, they don't know how to find out that which they do not know, because they don't know they don't know anymore. They're so opinionated, they think they know, right? They're all arrogant enough, these millennials, to believe that they know all there is to know, and there's nothing of your rotten system that they need to know. That's the deconstruction of it, the critical theory. I know enough about your system to know it's patriarchal and rotten. So you can't talk to them. They're the dead. They're intellectually dead.
And isn't that the perfect cover story for maybe the fear of knowing?
Well,
maybe that's what it is.
Well, no, it's the fear of being a self. These people are dripping in. All their complex is based in self-loathing. And that relates back to, their matrophobia and things that nobody wants to talk about. So like say the girl's mutilation of herself. It's more in the girls than it is in the boys. All right, why is that? That already shows you what I'm talking about. Because in the great fight, I don't know what interview it was where I talked about, the teenage, well, even in their dress, the ripped clothes and all, is a fight with the parents. Oh, yes, it was one on Female Illuminati where we talked about the blood-soaked pop icons like Madonna, where you keep seeing this blood or fangs or claws, right? It's ubiquitous. That has nothing to do with anything but my fight with my mother and whether I'm going to win it or not. That's all it's about, right? And the blood doubles up for the menstrual, which is the girl has to be old enough to turn around and have the guts to face the mother. As a younger girl, she's the victim. But if I shed menstrual blood and I show it all over me, and then they have these meat dresses, and there's a lot of other symbolism involved in this, is to show, I'm now able to I'm going to enter into a fight with you. Let's see who's going to win this scrap now. So the coming of age of a girl is that her teenage years. See, there was a just a couple of weeks ago, it was all over the net about this mother who sat this beautiful daughter down. I don't know if you've seen it, who had this most beautiful long blonde hair. She sat her daughter down and she fucking chopped this kid's hair into this crazy elfin, boyish look. She looked like some fucking Mia Farrow gone mad. There is not a person on this planet who could tell you why that happened. And it happens to girls all over the place. It's called female envy, where the mother who's lost her looks and lost her appeal absolutely lives, and I can't stress this enough, in a state of pathological envy of the beauty of her own daughter. It's part of the matrophobia. And so much so that it can take many forms. Butchering the daughter's looks and making them, look like a fucking social justice war is one of these. They approve it. They look themselves like that. They sometimes dress sloppy and get their own looks to be like this, and the daughter follows suit stupidly in the form of, right? Because remember, matrophobia is to be covered up. So you cover it up by pretending that you love mother, and that you'll do anything she does. You see, this is if you have eyes to see, you'll see it. Then there's even sorcery involved in this, where the mother's will is so necrophilous that they will banjax the girl's talent, almost willing the girl to damage herself, have an accident. Say an example, one that crossed my path was a girl whose ice skating career was totally destroyed by her falling down and breaking her ankle. She's relating the story, doesn't know. Now I'm looking at that going, And it was obvious to me, because it's not just one person who goes through this. Many, many girls do this, where the mother's will sabotages their royal road to success. Now, the story doesn't end there, because, of course, the child actually knows this deep down inside, but has it heavily repressed. So later on, when they go towards the rock and roll or gothic lifestyle, the black fingernails and the tattoos and the fucking, the pins and the black eyeliner and the emo looks. This is all and the leather and the hanging out with your Lemmies and all the biker types and all right. It's like, what the fuck is that? I'm for this. Yeah, but those chicks don't care about you. These chicks are rehearsing something, you stupid goats. Right? And sparring, going to the bad boys is all part of it. But it's all focused on the fight with the mother. But to get to the point, during this dragon fight, there's only going to be one of two outcomes. I defeat her and put her in her place and go, done. Right? Or I succumb again and I lose the fight and I have to fall back into society and drift away and, I get neurotic. So this is all what happens in every girl's life, whether they know it or not. So these, when you lose the fight, the self-loathing's there anyway, but you're trying to overcome your self-loathing by going, yeah, did it. And if you know how to read symbolism on advertising, where women are in advertising and all sorts of not sitcoms, but commercials on TV, but also in magazines, you'll see this pose. You can decode everything I'm talking about by looking at the various poses and the various attitudes of women in regards how they've overcome this. And the desire is to overcome their self-loathing. Now, what happens to those women then who don't feel that they've won the fight, that their mother again turned out to be the winner again? And this happens, right? Then that woman becomes necrophilus. She's lost the dragon fight, and she's riddled with metrophobia. Well, then there's different levels of the mild neurosis, the high, neurosis, the psychosis, and the four other we've talked about before, in Surviving the Pathocracy, the Pathocalypse article. I go into all of that. These, you become one of these hysterics, and if you're hysterics, you join the crowd. If you're schizoid, you join the crowd, right? So everything we're seeing in today is born out of these psychological dynamics. But even the ones that I've just described, although ubiquitous throughout the world, they almost take a secondary seat to the one of religion, because religion is so old. It deals with the emotions. It deals with the transcendent imago, not just mom and dad. We're into God now. We're into transcendent father figures. We're into transcendent mother figures, right? We're dealing with the whole of Mexico, the whole of Ireland, the whole of Spain. We're dealing with whole cultures who are going to be riddled with primal guilt. And they won't listen, not even to the atheists. They won't listen to anybody saying, hey, look, this doesn't make sense. There was 16 crucified saviors, the whole thing, right? You don't want to listen to any of that. Until the 6th century, Jesus didn't even have a beard. He was always presented as a young child, young youth. Hey, what do that? Or this part was introduced later on. The rapture has no precedent in Christianity. Baptism was not supported by Jesus. Common prayer was not supported by Jesus in the Bible. All of these, all of the myriad of contradictions. Just go to my Kersey Graves pages on fucking astrotheology.com and come back and tell me I'm wrong. Or James Wheelis, or any of these great minds that we're talking about, right? The contradictions are so rife. But the thing, what I'm trying to say here is that it. The most deep believer is in a state of inner crisis. And that guilt that's awakened from his moral center, his moral voice, plays right into the hands of any monster. Any George Soros, any Klaus Schwab, any Al Gore, anybody at all that wants to rule. There's Mao or it's Stalin. They run it by then awakening guilt. You're not a communist? Like in Mao Zedong's world, you're one of those revolutionary reactionaries, put you up against a wall. Do you know you're taking the food out of your brother's mouths?
That's what they're doing to us in Canada right now. That's how they're talking to anybody that doesn't go along with what Trudeau's up to.
Yeah, the shaming that they do. You're a trucker. You have the dare to speak against us. You didn't get the vax. Do you know what that means for your neighbors and the people in your school and all this? You see, but what we were talking about is not that. That's obscene. Where's the pushback? I am now describing the dynamics of the impotency against it. So I hope the one who really gets this can take the deepest sigh and go, all right, now I am initiated. Because now I'm no longer looking for that. It may come in another form, but I now am tempered in my vision of what the world is going to do and not do, and I can make my own personal decisions then and stop hanging around the street corner waiting for revolution to happen. I'm more chastened, I'm more tempered, I understand, because you're right. This block needs to be removed, and since it's bloody unlikely that it will, in fact, we may even have a religious resurgence of anything. It would be much more likely than what I'm talking about. Well, you can be ready for that now. Right? You can be ready attitudinally for that right now. Or you do as Esoteric Thoughts was doing and say, I'm a bit weak on this, the thing you're pointing about Christianity and religion in general. Now I'm going to dive in and start studying it. Where's your astrotheology site? Where are those interviews? Right. So now you go slow with yourself, but you do it in this very calm and meditative way because you now know. And this goes whether you're believing in the Dalai Lama's fucking Buddhism number or some Hinduism or Sikhism. It won't matter. What we've just said about Western Christianity goes for all of these groups. And it's guilt guilt, guilt. You didn't go to church on the Sunday? Or you didn't go to the synagogue on the Sunday? Oh my God. And the Sikhs have their own guilt trip. And you ate fish on the Friday, or you drank, don't you know?
Where's the picture of the guru in your living room?
Yeah, and why did you have sex before 21 when the guru says you can't have it, you won't be able to get initiated, and blah, 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 blah. Right? Guilt, 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 guilt. But it's so ubiquitous, we don't notice it. But when you do, and you really take it seriously on a very deep level, now you're empowered in a way that I wish the whole human race was empowered. And one could naively say, well, atheism, that is the royal road to what you're talking about. No, it's not. Because that scientism is a dogma of its own. They're just replacing it with, no. No, doesn't work. Right? There's other, see, because that's steering you away from, I want to get people back to to the moral conscience within. But atheism doesn't lead you away. It leads you away from it just as religion leads you away from it. They both serve the same purpose of removing you from your center. You are an embodiment of the moral universe. The very dimensions of your body, right? The phi ratio and the Fibonacci, right? And all of that, the golden section is in your body. That is there so that you can physically measure your coordinates as anthropos. That is the moral universe within and the moral universe without, or in sympatico, right? But we don't teach sacred geometry or sacred principles in number, to our children. We've just had Scott on, right?
Oh, great.
Going over that again. We've done brilliant stuff with him before.
Yeah.
How many times does that need to be drilled into people? Well, how many books on sacred geometry are in the average shelf, where your children can get hold of it? How many people who even did art, kids who've got a really good artistic expression, how many of them know about sacred geometry and what's really behind that, and that the proportions of your own body embody it? And these fucking Leonardo da Vinci's knew that. If you knew it, do you know how that would change your attitude towards how a city is designed and a house is designed, and all these other things, and how organic then you would be designing things?
And you wouldn't hate your body so much. You wouldn't be getting sucked into this, I don't feel like I'm what I'm born in my body. You can get sucked into that nonsense.
Right. So back to the thing about the mutilation. The girl who fails in her matrophobic fight does what? The aggression that should have been healthily focused on the perpetrator of evil in their life turns out to be immune to that. You can't express it. What is the next psychological syndrome? Self-hate. I cut at my genitalia because I hate myself for being a failure in the fight. Right? The pussy gets the blame because the pussy is the female. Right? So you're instead of turning it onto the Medusan mother, you turn it on yourself. You cut your breasts off. You want to change. You want to be a boy. You want to be, right? It's epidemic amongst girls because of this. It all devolves back to matrophobia, the Electra complex. All the details are on the Dragon Mother site, right? Nobody wants to know. Nobody picks it up because it's ubiquitous. It's in the blood. So the girl is loaded with self-loathing and then wants to make up for it by the bling and by the champagne parties at Vegas and the limousines with the jacuzzis in it and following some imbecile celebrity and then being attracted to all the blood and gut symbolism. See, right? They're not aware of anything we're talking about, but they will go for the symbolism provided by the media. So in the same way that the media lure you with that symbolism, the same way that the controllers lure you with guilt, they're immobilizing you. So inner meets outer, So until the story of matrophobia goes around and women can reevaluate and suddenly realize, I'm doing this to myself. I'm butchering my femininity because I failed in my heroic task of confronting the parents. Just like this mother who butchered the looks of her daughter out of just pure spite and envy and wanted to hold back. She actually hates beauty, hates her daughter, is going to go tomorrow and, do well in life and impress the boys and marry rich and all. That mother couldn't stand it. And there she was. Actually ran a camera to show how she's doing it. And the girl sits there grinning. I think I'm okay with this, right? riddled with fucking hatred, but can't express it because it's adultism. Adultism prevents you, but later on in the teenage years, right, you start to turn it within. So all the syndromes we see of women in their teenage years is self-loathing, self-hatred, because they've lost the dragon fight.
And the controllers of all these narratives that we're seeing this on the cultural level of these social engineers, they know what you're talking about. That's
Completely.
why it's important to know what you're talking about. Is people think, oh, it's kind of uncomfortable. Yeah, because you got to know that they have this dialed in and they actually know how to weaponize this shit, let alone the natural part of it, you know?
Right. And they do so by making psychology, cutting it out. In the 1970s, for just a blip, there was some movies, there was some excellent books. It was kind of popular along with this, subliminal seduction stuff. Books on psychology, hidden persuaders, all psychological. It blipped again, but quickly, I've got a article called Say No to Psychology. Read that on the Dragon Mother site. We can maybe link it up. And that will walk you through that. It came and it went. And that's a sad thing. And then by the time of the 80s, it was canceled again. And has been ever since. You can get your Dr. Phil's, but that's mostly just accusing people and just tepid. You see, the real thing is not in the world. So, that's why my work is dedicated to changing that. But it's an anti-psychological country. And then back to the Christian thing, that is the real hamstrings, the masculine woman and the masculine man from fighting tyranny. So then again, when you know that this is the thing that's blocking the gears, you can't get out, right? The clutch won't work. You just can't get into the next gear. It actually it helps you pull over and breathe. You know the answer now. And hard as that fact is to digest, you at least now can be easy on yourself. You've got it. It's not going to happen. So you can stop panicking, right? And then you find a calm, still point from which to build again. It is very, very important for this to take place in people's lives. So it's very cathartic. And you can see that the people have this deadly mark on them and how they're just completely the puppet masters of total control over their psyche and what the dangers of religion were and are. And then you can say, right, I'm not an atheist. I'm not, I'm just observing the fact. And now I know about the guilt complex, and we've done great podcasts on it in the past, especially on the existential aspect of it, where the shame comes in to be involved as well. But you can see that is the nugget. You believe a lie, and it's a lie, even though you believe it. There's a deeper moral voice that knows that you believe a lie. That creates an organic form of guilt that the leaders then know how to manipulate to the nth degree. And that immobilizes anyone, even though there's crimes happening all around you, crimes that your forefathers would have fucking dragged out and stamped on immediately. But now you know its etiology. Now you know the history of tyranny and how it works, with the guilt complex.
And I mean, yeah, as hard as this might be for people, you have to remember that evil always hides behind the light, right? That's the whole point of understanding this idea of princes of light. It sounds glorious, doesn't it? If only. But it's not. It's the princes that wield the light as a weapon to blind you from the truth. And that's the difference. And that's why these things are so successful, is because they know you want spirituality. They know you want to connect more to yourself, to nature, to God, or whatever you want to call it. But they just know how to get in the way and manipulate you into their little basket of it and their little way of doing it. And then that disempowers you from even having the true connection. This was what I was hearing when I was doing this bit with Alvin Boyd Kuhn, was he was lamenting and trying to say in the beginning, he's like, he personally was trying to say, I'm not here to destroy religion. I'm here to put it back in its rightful place. Right. And his definition of religion would differ from the average person. Right. And you get into it and you go, okay. And he said, we got turned off the rails at some point. Something came in, and I remember he even asked, he's like, in later stages of history than the time I'm writing in, maybe we'll figure out whether this was an organic process that happened to corrupt it or whether there was a hidden hand at work. And I went, well, now we're in the modern age and we know maybe a bit of both, but definitely the hidden hand. And I guess I know we're wrapping up here, Michael, but really quickly, this brings up my question that I know comes from people that are maybe sort of skeptical of some of it. They might say, if they still come from that Christian way of looking at this conspiracy, is they'll say, well, isn't the tenets of the Illuminati to eradicate religion as one of their attacks on the culture? And isn't that also what you're saying, right? This would be one of the critiques they would come up with. And you've studied this a long time. What would you say would be their reason for putting that trope out? Or do they have a different meaning when they're saying that? What do you think about that?
Well, it's just false information. The Illuminati were religious. That's the answer. Their own writings, if you go to it, Baron von Neig and Adam Weishaupt were deeply spiritual people. They believed in God. They're not atheists. Whoever put that out is a liar and a disinformationalist and somebody who didn't read the original documents. All the original documents. They just wanted to get rid of priest culture, which they thought had become, foul. Now, it's true that there were people who were Jacobins. Like I said, the funder of the Illuminati, one of them, Moses Mendelssohn, was a leading Jacobin, right? But just because you're not actually card-carrying Catholic at that time didn't mean that you weren't a deist, say, for instance, right? Or a pantheist, or a believer in God. So actually, it turns out that they were believers in God. There's not even hardly any evidence at all of them being atheists. So that's actually disinformation. So that's how you stop that one. The Illuminati were not atheists. That's not what they were about. They were mystics who, in their own way, this is one of the reasons why they were able to attract people like Shelley, and Schiller, and some of these great intellectuals, and Goethe. There was a sort of a bevy of people hovering around the Illuminati, and sort of into them, because people believed the Illuminati's card wasn't atheism; it was shaking off the chains of Orthodox religion, largely for the same reasons we're talking about, because it's bullshit. Now, your average Christian who believes in the bullshit will always frame it as if the Illuminati was against religion. That's too narrow. That's what the religious man believes, that they were a threat to his. Well, he thinks anybody was a threat. He hates everybody, including denominations of his own religion. Why would you believe what they say? And these guys have their own, sort of religious understanding. The fucking Priory of Zion do. The Templars do. The Cistercians do. They're all. Remember, this is easy to understand when you say you can be Gnostic. So let's take Moses Mendelssohn as an example. Super Jew is funding the Illuminati. When they sit around and have these convocations and meetings with their friends, they are talking about German idealism. They're talking about Schopenhauer. They're talking about atheism. They're looking at all of this, and they are coming from. The way I look at it is that they're coming from a Gnostic point of view. And the moment that you see this, you say the demiurge who fashioned this world as a plaything has enslaved all of us. So we are the Gnostics who see that this is the case. We come, from that tradition. We're the alumni. Part of the demiurge's matrix of control are the priests, the black robes. Hey, I used to be one of them. I used to believe it. My dad was a clergyman, but I've renounced it. Or my dad was a rabbi, says the Jewish members. Fuck, I got away from that. I'm an enlightened young man. But Blake, you can't think of anybody back then. Hegel, they all flew the flag of freedom and liberty until they all woke up, right? But many of the great minds that we know, Beethoven was a card-carrying, liberal. until Napoleon, when Napoleon crowned him. So the famous story is that when Napoleon crowned himself emperor, the symphony that Beethoven had composed for the Napoleon called Eroica, he stabbed his pen right through it, and you can still see the manuscript today. He defaced Eroica. Later he brought it back out again because his friends begged him to. But and Hegel the same. Hegel pulled his hair out going, "You fucking tyrant bastard." But all the young men were behind Napoleon's, ride through Europe, bringing liberty and fraternity to all, right? So this was the phase of the libertine and those who were trying to cast off the chains. It's like, cast off the chains that bind you, Shelley's great poem, right? Cast them down. We are many, they are few, all of this. Like I said, the last king strangled with the guts of the last priest. So the Illuminati were answering that. But the religious fucker accuses them of being, devil worshippers and atheists. There's nothing to support that at all. They're evil. If you want to call them evil, go ahead. But do it as we've done in this program. Show what they were created for. Okay? Part camouflage, part this, part that, right? All of these secret societies had their own reason for existing. These clerics were busy. And they wanted to recruit intelligent men, highly intelligent men. But they knew that, there's different flavors. People rather have the Rosicrucians, or they have the Grand Orient, or strict observance, or Illuminists, right? Skull and Bones, or, there's Catholic guys, there's Protestant guys. We need a bevy of different organizations for different countries and different religions and different dispositions. And that's why you have your guilds and all of the, and then there's conservative people who just won't buy into any liberal stuff. Then you get your ultra liberals, right? So they created all of these different organizations to make sure it's a catch-all for the whole human race. They're very
like mafia fronts when they set up businesses, right? Like it's kind of like that. Like you go in thinking you're buying a cigar, and you don't know you're supporting your local mafia.
Not having a clue, but they put the symbolism on it. If you are smart enough to decode it, like the man riding the horse, and all. It's wonderful when you get into the symbolism if you can correctly decode it, and that's what Female Illuminati is all about. That website is to show you, that to translate like Grail coming from Gratus, and all of the different symbolism that is largely sort of misinterpreted, I find, or poorly interpreted by a lot of other people. I think they mean well, right? But the word Mont, M-O-N-T, Montefiore, Mountbatten, Rosemont, Mount Stewart. What is this M-O-N-T number, right? You see? So there's lots and lots of different clues that they've left us. And as I say, etymology, symbolism, and then secret society symbolism. Those three is what you have to always use, as means to the end. These are the three keys that help open many a locked door. But when it comes to today's political climate, why so much evil is so obvious, and everyone is asking the question, any sincere person is, why are we not pushing back? You've got to realize that this is to be at the door of religion. This is the reason. But America is anti-psychological, so the moment you start talking about guilt complexes and all, they just like glaze right over. They cannot. This is, part of the stone in the shoe that stops you getting to the garden gate, let alone climbing the fucking mountain. So, I'm just waiting to see what can happen along those lines. And the rise of religion, again, and as a response to what's taken place, is not a good thing. It may act that, this is good, this mobilizing people, communities getting back together again, and sooner or later they're all going to turn and overthrow tyranny, right? No. I don't see that at all. That's not something I would buy into. And just because, you have ignorance squared, you've also got the guilt complex highly, magnified. And I just don't see that taking place. I really don't. I hope the fuck I'm wrong, but I don't see it being the cause. It might come from some other motive. I'm not shutting all doors of possibility, but I can tell you that one to me is shut.
Well, we may make little progresses on certain fronts, right?
That's right.
And there might be positives to that for a period. Like we've talked about that idea of like a cultural Christianity or something, just to ward off the influx of all these other factions. Like you get it, right? But and that's why I did my series on the idea of like an esoteric kind of interpretation, like the way Kuhn and Massey and many others would look at it to go, oh, well, if you're talking about that could actually be more powerful than just going back to the medieval doctrines that have divided it. Like think about it. Like I've always said this too, even about the medics. If everybody keeps going to these medics, and then we saw what happened with all this pandemic stuff, and you're still going back to them, well, you're just empowering them and not realizing that they are just advertising to your insecurity and your fear of death on the physical domain in the same way that the priests are doing it on the spiritual domain. So if you keep batting those, and they're controlled by the same steering committees. And so you go, okay, you know, we might get some headway exposing elements of these things, but what you're saying is until the whole picture of the true roots of tyranny and evil get understood and the whole picture of the history, there's not going to be any permanent change in the world where true freedom and truth and justice exist until those are addressed.
That's right. And remember, there's not only the premiums on Gnosticism, but there's at least 3 back-to-back Gnostic podcasts, and the third one was on Alvin Boyd Kuhn.
Right.
Find those and link them up, because it's in the spirit of Alvin Boyd Kuhn that I'm talking about, you know, the solutions, the hermetic way. And when you have these societies like the Illuminati, they have a Gnostic. They are religious, but they're claiming that the world order that they want to overthrow is in the name of, you know, breaking the demiurge's control. So the Christian who knows nothing fucking about that and cannot even spot the Gnostic elements in their own bloody awful religion accuse the Illuminati of being atheists. It's the easiest way, isn't it, to burn them at the stake? But Gnosticism is at the heart of most of the Eastern religions, at the heart of Christianity. Doesn't matter who's arguing different. Is at the heart of Judaism, Islam. That the world is a frightful, horrible place. You've got to have these priests, and you know, to show you the way out. And that's why most of all of those religions are terribly nature-hating and world-denying. There's a scene in Alex Jones's first Bohemian Grove video where he stands, you know, eating berries off a tree, and he clearly says, "Yeah, I like nature like the next guy, but I'm not going to worship it," as he swallows a berry. I'll never forget that. That's Christianity. He's a Christian, isn't he? So he embodies there perfectly this idea. The Hermetic person does worship nature because nature is the prime datum. It is the premise. Go back to basic premises. Nature is your premise. Anyone like a Gnostic who hates the world, and they really do hate it, they want to get away from it, this is where a lot of problems begin. And so the New Age movement is just a new iteration, highly funded Gnostic cult, hybridized, Gnostic cult. And wherever you find Gnosticism, sadly, you will find sprinklings of original Hermeticism, because Gnosticism's actual canon is pretty threadbare. And so as the centuries went by, and even right back at the time of Alexandria, the Gnostics start pretty much ladling out, stealing quite liberally from Hermeticists. So that's a whole separate scholarly study of how to take out, the Gnostic elements from Hermeticism and the Hermetic elements from Gnosticism. Who the hell wants to, that's for specialists, right? But the bottom line is Hermeticism always goes back to nature. Gnosticism doesn't bother with it. This is a good way to, really grasp it. And so you have this mix of great scholars who love nature, like Wordsworth and Schelling, and you'll get other intellectuals who are a little bit more, dismissive of nature, but also quite wise people and all of that. But the accusations of Christians to any of these groups is to be taken with a pinch of fucking salt, because obviously they're the fifth sect. They're one of the most bastardized. Right? James and the Nazarenes were right. Paul is a wicked priest. Paul had no right taking Jewish customs of the Messiah, mixing it up with some pagan stuff about sun kings, doing all of these things that Jews find abhorrent. But he's like stealing from them, stealing from the Essenes, stealing from the Nazarenes and other groups, and then making this hodgepodge and selling it to the Gentile world of the West, which established the fifth sect. They moved to Rome and set up their new bastion of power right on the site of the cult of Mithra, who's androgynous. Mithra is a female name. Mithras, Mithra in Persian is woman. It's a feminine word. So these early gods like Yahweh were, androgynous. But to keep to the point, the papists set up their dynasty, and it went strong until, the 1860s, when a massive attempt to overthrow them, I believe, was successful. And it may have taken, a long time, more years than that. The details are unimportant. I think it's Article 6 or something like that on the female Illuminati site, the Order of Sion. We occult Christianity. I go into that a bit more. But what we've done now is consolidate the part and add this part about the Gaionum, because that is a very important road that leads you to the heart of the origins of Masonry. And without that story of the Sadducees and the Order of Melchizedek, I don't think we really have the full story. Great as other books have been written, I don't think that the final piece, the jigsaw, looks ugly because there's big pieces missing at the end. I think I've put them in, so that we can finally close the book on that, on the origins of Masonry.
Well, it's an incredible study, that's for
That's
sure.
the
In
name
these
of the
last
book,
two podcasts,
The Bridge to the Light. What do you think that bridge is that they're referring to? Could it be this rainbow bridge? And what are we talking about? Because if I just said that this visible spectrum is actually us, that would even insist that we're kind of like bridges to the light. I'm going to simplify this for you. What's actually going on here is that this visible spectrum that you're seeing is the bridge between the long waves all the way up to the gamma rays, to the cosmic rays. So you see how you got long waves on what would be the right side, and then on the left you have all the way up to that symbol, the gamma rays, and then after that comes the cosmic rays. Who's in between? The visible spectrum. Who are they? They're the bridges. They're in physicality. Okay, we need to go to physicality.
In fact, everything is in physicality. So in the journey, let's just say theoretically, because we're going to do a little traveling here. So how I come to see it and really understand it.
Because,
sometimes you gotta have that spiritual, and you gotta have that spiritual, you gotta have that electronic. Being like electrician, engineer, okay, to figure this out.
and it always is that generally
One is devoid of the other, meaning that if you know a lot about electrical engineering, your spiritual consciousness has a tendency to be maybe just religious. And if you are completely out of the religious box and you understand your power, you have a tendency to have maybe a
disdain.
Towards science and technology.
So in engineering and those kinds of things, it's just generally,
It would be almost an anomaly to
find somebody that knows a lot about both of these. And this is
why I feel
like that. It's just haven't dawned on humanity yet. Hasn't dawned on the spiritual speakers and teachers that, hey man, this is a little bit more deeper than you think. Because technically, if I'm right, and I know that I am, because it's not up to me to be right, I just gotta do the math. Let me show you something. Let me blow this up real quick here.
Yo.
The spirit double terminated my hands and feet. Does the flow still go when it heard to wait? My upper half circumnavigate the plate and chose to eat. Those perplexed by the flower of life just need to take a seed. Sit in yourself, don't take it from me, it's not even possible. Smash any obstacle, Hulk's in doubt, rakes the sand, then waits for the problem. Read, he's in the story, reversing the style. It's been a while, in the fertile gardens of the mind. So inside, in me, twin Babylon towers freely fall down. Fuck your glamour and sodomy. I'll bring it to you like the truth. And return balance to Atlas. Wizards out of practice. Now it's time, honestly. Your endless infinity is quite massive. Shed the ceiling. In the scene. Green glasses. Massive. Shed the ceiling. In the scene. Green glasses.